Hi, welcome to Gadgets 360. Today we are unboxing and getting our first look at Huawei's brand new camera flagship, the Huawei P30 Pro. This phone will be launched in India very soon, and it comes just shortly after the global unveil which happened in Paris last week. We're quite excited, so without further ado, let's get started. Here we have the box itself, which is plain and simple white. The only interesting thing worth noticing is the Leica logo with quad camera written here, which means that Huawei has worked with Leica on all the cameras on this phone. Here we can tell that we have a 256GB unit with 8GB of RAM, and there are various options internationally, but we don't know which ones Huawei has launched in India yet. So right on top we have the phone itself wrapped in plastic. You can see the massive camera module on the back, and of course this color, which Huawei calls Aurora. It's inspired by nature and the movement of the sun at different times of the day. So let's pull this plastic off. Here is our first look at the Aurora color finish for the Huawei P30 Pro. So we know that Huawei is launching this phone in India in at least two different color options, one of which is this one, Aurora, and the other is called Breathing Crystal. Internationally, there's also a plain black version and an amber version. We don't know yet if those are coming to India, but we hope that the black one does, because there will be people who would prefer a simpler black finish. As you can see, there is a little bit of a color gradient here, and it shifts as you move the phone around. When we look at it head on, the bottom looks a little purplish and the top looks light blue. So the Huawei P30 Pro is 8.41mm thick and it weighs 192 grams, which is on the larger side for a phone. Thankfully, the body has an IP68 rating for water and dust resistance. So that was a very quick first look at the Huawei P30 Pro. Before we go further, let's check out the box contents and set up Android on this phone. Right on top we have this little paper folder with nothing inside except for a clear plastic case. There should be some paperwork, but our review unit doesn't seem to have that. We also have a SIM eject pin here. Next we see the massive 40-watt Huawei supercharger, a standard USB Type-C cable, and a pretty plain looking headset that's obviously inspired by Apple's EarPods, and of course a Type-C connector. And now for a closer look at the phone itself. What we have here is a 6.47-inch Full HD Plus 1080 by 2340 display with a 19.5:9 aspect ratio, a little dewdrop notch there for the front camera, HDR support and DCI-P3 color space support. This is a curved OLED panel, and you can see at the sides there that it does curve very much like Samsung's recent phones. One very interesting thing to note is there is no earpiece on the top. Huawei has developed what it calls an acoustic display, so the glass itself vibrates. The top portion of it at least vibrates, and you should be able to hear your caller very clearly no matter how you position this phone. That's something we cannot wait to test in our full review coming up very soon. We also have an in-display fingerprint sensor which isn't set up right now, but we'll be testing that as well because Huawei says it has improved it compared to previous generations. Let's take a look at the sides of this phone. There's nothing at all on the left. And on the right, we just have the standard power and volume buttons. On the top, there's an infrared emitter which you can use to control appliances, and that should be interesting for some people. On the bottom, we have a USB Type-C port in the middle, a speaker grill, and a tray here which looks small, but it accommodates 2 nano SIMs, one on either side. So now let's talk about all the cameras in a little more detail. Starting at the top, we have the 20 megapixel ultra-wide sensor. In the middle is the primary sensor, which has a 40 megapixel resolution, and what Huawei is calling a super spectrum sensor, which doesn't have the typical RGB pixels but RYYB pixels instead, and Huawei says that improves quality. So we'll have to test that out in our full review. Most interesting is this square cutout on the bottom, which is Huawei's periscope telephoto camera. And what this is a 5x optical zoom lens, which is arranged horizontally over here with a prism so that the whole thing fits into the body of this phone. What Huawei says is you can get 5x optical zoom, 10x hybrid zoom, and 50x digital zoom. Of course, we will have full test results for all of these cameras in our full review, which is coming up pretty soon, so stay tuned to Gadgets 360. Finally, we have the fourth camera over here, which is to the side of the main module, and this is a time of flight camera, which is used to measure depth information, and Huawei says that this can come in handy for things like games and for AR applications, although not a lot of those have been released right now. There are features that have been demonstrated, but they will be released following the launch. Finally, of course, we have the dual LED flash here on the top. And here on the front, we have a 32 megapixel front camera. Let's talk a little bit about the specifications of this phone. We have Huawei's flagship 7nm Kirin 980 processor. Huawei also says that speed improvements come in the form of a new file system, so that's a software level improvement, and that's part of the new EMUI 9.1, which you can see over here. Now, what Huawei says is that it has improved the spacing and the size of icons, as well as the general colors and the theme overall. We'll take a look at all the features of EMUI 9.1 in our full review. The unit that we're looking at right now has 8 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage. We don't know exactly what variants Huawei will launch in India, but internationally you can get this phone with between 128 and 512 gigs of storage. The Huawei P30 Pro has a fairly large 4200 mAh battery, but what's more interesting is that this phone supports very quick charging with the bundled 40-watt charger, as well as 15-watt wireless charging and 2.5-watt reverse wireless charging for your... So that was our quick unboxing and overview of the brand new Huawei P30 Pro. Stay tuned to Gadgets 360 for our full review coming up very soon, in which we'll go into deep detail about this phone's performance, cameras, battery life, and much more. Thanks for watching.